2. Living things. Imagine adding water to a packet of powder and ending up with a tank full of swimming creatures. This may seem like science fiction, but it's true. Brine shrimp are small relatives of crab and lobsters. Brine shrimp eggs can live for many years in tiny, hard cases. When you add water and set up the proper environment for the eggs, the brine shrimp hatch and thrive. Do you know how bread is made? One of the most important ingredients is yeast. Open a packet of yeast and you will see a bunch of tiny, dried specks. If you drop these specks in a cup of warm water with a little sugar, they will start to bubble and froth. If you look at the mixture under a microscope, figure 2.1, you will see individual clumps of yeast growing and even multiplying. Is yeast a living organism? In this section, you will learn what it means to be alive. An organism is an individual form of life. A tree is an organism, and so is yeast. So are you. What makes something alive? As with many questions in science, the answer is not easy and is still argued among scientists. If you've ever had a cold or the flu, you are familiar with the effects of viruses. Viruses are very tiny things that have some of the characteristics of living things but are not considered alive by scientists. So what makes something alive? Having a set of rules is a good way to get closer to the answers. Biologists often use 5 basic rules to classify something as living or non-living. 5 characteristics of living things include: 1. Living things respond to their surroundings. 2. Living things grow and develop. 3. Living things are able to reproduce. 4. Living things use energy. 5. Living things are made of smaller building blocks called cells. Response and stimulus. Have you ever gone from a dark room into the sunshine? You respond by squinting your eyes. The brightness of the sun is called a stimulus, and your reaction to it is called a response. All living things respond to a stimulus. You may think of growth as an increase in size. You have increased in size since you were born. Growth also refers to an increase in mass and to an increase in number of cells. Reproduction. The process of making more of the same kind of organism is called reproduction. Because all living things eventually die, reproduction allows life to continue. All living things take material from their surroundings, such as food, water, and gases. They use these materials to get energy. This energy is needed to carry out all of the life functions. A cell is the smallest unit of a living thing. It is the simplest structure that can carry out all of the functions described above. You'll learn more about cells in Unit 2. Barnacle alive. One day at the beach, Zeke picked up one of the many rocks that were covered in white bumps, figure 2.2. He thought that the rock would look nice in his marine aquarium, so he brought it home and dropped it into his tank. One day, while watching the fish in his tank, Zeke got a surprise. The white bumps on the rock had sprouted tiny legs and were waving back and forth in the water. The rock was alive. Actually, the white bumps were alive. Zeke's rock was covered with tiny organisms called barnacles. These creatures live in tide pools along the seacoast where waves crash and tides cause water to flow in and out. Inside its shells, the barnacles can hold seawater to survive the many hours of drought at low tide. At high tide, the shells open and the barnacles begin to feed. Its long, comb-like legs sweep back and forth to catch tiny organisms called plankton. Is the barnacle alive? Let's use the 5 criteria to decide. 1. Barnacles respond to their environment by closing their shells at low tide and opening them at high tide. 2. Barnacles grow and develop. They begin life as free-swimming creatures. Once they find a good spot, they glue themselves to a rock and form a shell. 3. Barnacles reproduce. After fertilization from a male barnacle, females hold the eggs in their shell until they hatch. 4. By waving their legs, barnacles capture food. They use energy from the food to move their legs, open and close their shells, and carry out all life processes. If you examined the legs of a barnacle with a microscope, you would see that they are made of individual cells. Things and types of energy. What is energy? You have read that living things use energy. Energy is sometimes defined as the ability to cause change or to do work. There are many forms of energy, figure 2.4. Any form can be converted into another form. Living things can convert one form of energy into others. Radiant energy is also known as the electromagnetic energy. Light is made up of waves called electromagnetic waves. There are many different types of electromagnetic waves, including the light we see, ultraviolet light, X-rays, infrared radiation, radio waves, and microwaves. This is the type of energy that reaches Earth from the sun and is captured by plants. Chemical energy is energy stored in molecules. Energy stored by living things can be in this form. When molecules are rearranged, chemical energy is released. When animals eat plants, they use chemical energy stored by the plants to move, grow, and reproduce. Mechanical energy is the energy an object has due to its motion or position. You store mechanical energy when you climb a hill. The energy is released when you go back down the hill. Electrical energy is carried by the flow of electric current. Nerve impulses in your body are electrical energy. Thermal energy flows whenever there is temperature difference. Heat is a form of thermal energy. Thermal energy flows from your hand to any cooler object that you touch, such as ice cream. Nuclear energy results from splitting or combining the nuclei of atoms. Nuclear energy gained by splitting uranium atoms is converted to electrical energy in power plants. Pause here and answer these questions. Living things are organized. You have learned that a system is a group of factors that are related in some way. You can think of individual organisms as a living system. What variables affect you as a system? An obvious answer is the temperature around you. The type of food you eat is another variable. Your body responds to different variables in different ways. In this section, you'll learn about how living things are organized and the variables that affect them. The organization of living things. Is your room disorganized? Even if it is, you are not. As a living system, your body is organized to use matter and energy to move, grow, and survive. Living things like you contain many levels of organization. These are described on the next few pages. A molecule is a basic unit of matter. Living things are made up of many different molecules. Each type of molecule has an important function. Your body contains molecules that store energy, control life functions, and even hold all the information you need to make another you. A cell is the basic unit of a living thing. Each cell is made up of different types of molecules, including proteins, carbohydrates, and others. Your body contains trillions of cells, each one a living system on its own. Some organisms are made up of only one cell. 2.6 shows what a one-celled organism called a euglena looks like. Organisms that are made up of more than one cell are called multicellular organisms. Tissues. Your body is made up of different types of tissues. You have skin cells, muscle cells, liver cells, nerve cells, and blood cells, to name just a few. A group of specialized cells that performs a particular function is called a tissue. For example, muscle tissue is a tissue that is able to contract. Figure 2.7 shows what your muscle tissue looks like under a microscope. Tissues combine to form organs, the next level of organization. An organ is a group of tissues that works together to carry out a set of functions. For example, your stomach is an organ that contains several types of tissues. Muscle tissue in your stomach contracts to mix food. Another type of tissue makes a chemical that breaks down the food. A group of organs that works together to perform a set of functions is called an organ system. For example, your digestive system consists of many organs, including the esophagus, stomach, small intestine, and large intestine. Each organ as a system performs a different function that is part of the digestive process. A multicellular organism like you, different body parts and organ systems take on different functions. The network of organ systems works together to keep the organism alive. An organism is an independently functioning living thing. Pause here and review the diagram. Variables and living systems. Living things can respond to changes in the surroundings to maintain a steady internal environment. The process of maintaining a life-supporting system is called homeostasis. Homeostasis happens at all levels of organization, including the cellular level, and is a characteristic of all living things. All sorts of variables affect an organism's ability to stay alive. These include temperature, food, water, and the level of oxygen. All organisms have built-in processes to help them survive when the variables change. Organisms can survive within a range of values for each variable. If a change is in a variable is too severe, the organism may not be able to maintain homeostasis and could die. You experience homeostasis every day, as you'll see in the following story. It was a hot day, so Sarah decided to go for a swim in the neighborhood pool. She packed a towel and headed out on her bicycle. As Sarah climbed up a hill, she began to drip with sweat. She couldn't wait to jump into the pool. When she started to swim, though, the water was so cold she couldn't stay in for very long. Once Sarah got out of the water, she started shivering. The shivering stopped once she felt warm again. Sweating and shivering are good examples of how your body responds to maintain a steady temperature. Normal human body temperature is 37 degrees Celsius. At this temperature, your cells can perform their functions. When it's too hot and your body temperature begins to rise, glands in your skin produce sweat to cool the temperature back down. When it's too cold, your body temperature begins to lower. Shivering is a response that warms your body temperature back up. Here and answer these questions.